How are you, my friend Andrew?
How's it going, Tash?
Doing well. So, we wanted to talk about real estate and
All right.
your beginnings and kind of how I'd like to say I'm an accidental real estate
Accidental
owner.
landlord.
But yeah, sorry. I think it's important. A lot of people want to get started, but they don't know how or where to start. So I figured maybe you would be a good person to talk to kind of talk about how you got started and kind of fell into this and how you progressed um,
Sure.
in that venture.
Yeah, living in New York City metro area, definitely expensive. So didn't think I could invest in real estate, but then I was reading some blogs, some forums. They ran into the same problem living in California and New York, and they bought property in the Midwest a lot cheaper there. So after did some research, I kind of jumped in and I picked Kansas City, Missouri. It was one reason was, it's supposedly it's the Silicon Valley of the Midwest. They called it Silicon Prairie, and then it was cheap there. But then, it's still, growing population. I mean, they have a football team there and stuff. So the property was $60,000 and needed like $12,000 of work. So all in, I think the down payment was like 14, 15,000, and it rented for $850. So
And
the
that,
mortgage. Mhm.
right, that's what I was going to ask. That covers at least it earns for itself at the very least.
Right. So the rent was 850. The mortgage was around 480, including the property taxes, insurance, and the property manager charged 9%, so like $76. So monthly expenses were 550 or something, and then the rent was 850. So there was a couple $100 of cash flow, which was okay, but nothing to write home about. And inevitably, there's always going to be repairs. Um, actually, I think Google Fiber picked Kansas City as the first city they were going to lay the fiber optics there, and that's one of the reasons I picked that city. But then the downside was, I think while they were laying fiber optics, they hit one of my sewer lines, or one of the, I guess the workers, and they eventually paid for it. But then it took a while to get the money. But then there are other repairs generally for houses, so like turnover costs when a tenant moves out, you gotta fix it up, or other repairs. So the cash flow was okay, but wasn't you know too exciting, but it was a good
But it
learning
was a start.
experience. It was a
And
start,
again, it
definitely.
was a yeah, yeah. I think when you start out with a limited resource, you're not going to hit it big right away, and that's important for people to know. Like it's a learning process for you, so you were learning as you were going. Now, you mentioned you picked Kansas City because of Google. Um, how did you come about finding your home? Like, what kind of resources did you specifically use? And all these resources that Andrew mentions, we'll mention in the
The
bottom in the
show notes.
comments, in the show notes, right? But yeah, go ahead. How did you come about finding the exact home?
Well, good. First, like Kansas City, but partly it was Google Fiber, but then it was other reasons. I think I mainly took talked with other investors on it's like a real estate investing forum, Bigger Pockets. And then they have forums with people invest in different places. So one person that came up a lot was the property manager I ended up working with. They said that he's honest, trustworthy, that he's a that the properties they invested with him they did well. So that's one of the reasons I kind of narrowed it down to him. And then I guess he had a list of properties that he already pre-screened. He had the projected rents. He had how much repairs he thought he would need, and how much revenue it would generate, or how much appreciation it would get over the years. So mainly I trusted him, his take on it, because I mean he's a local real estate agent slash property manager. So
So use the resource to find the house. And you mentioned there was was there a source for you to project the potential earnings that you would have based on numbers that you inputted for the house, or as the house listing comes up? Is it the same resource or something different?
What was that? What kind of resource were you looking for?
So you had a resource that helped you find a house. Now, is that the same resource that kind of tells you, hey, the projected mortgage for this home based on this cost is this, these are your expected uh, um,
Okay.
costs of whatever, and this is what you can expect to earn from this house. Is that the same resource, or did you have to plug in the numbers from one resource to the other in order to come up with the understanding of how much earnings you can potentially have?
Right. Yeah, actually, biggerpockets.com. That's what my go-to for investing in real estate. That's how I started, where I found a lot of my um, property managers, where I found the resources, and I think they have a calculator also, which you can use to plug in those numbers. And there's I think the Zillow has estimates on how much the property is worth, how much rent you can get from that, and then there's also another site like Rentometer, which has rents for that area. So those are helpful.
Great. Now, that was your first, and I know you have others. So how did you go about using your first property as a stepping stone to moving to others? And maybe kind of give a high level view on what you did in order to get more resources for your next homes, etc.
Yeah, actually, the first property I bought, I used my 401k loan. Not that I, encourage people to do that, but I took out the loan from there, and I used that down payment and closing costs were probably under $20,000. And like I said, the cash flow was like a few $100s each month. It was okay, but it wasn't gonna saving up that cash flow wasn't gonna be able to buy another house. But at one point, I think it was like 2 years later, I noticed on Zillow the property value jumped up. I bought it for like 72,000 basically, and it said that it would sell for around 110, and I was like, wow, that's a pretty decent increase. And I talked to a property manager. He said, yeah, that's pretty accurate. And I decided to do a cash out refinance. So basically, took out another mortgage and a higher mortgage, and then paid off the previous one. And I was able to take that difference, which was around 20 something thousand dollars, to buy another property.
So you use the equity from the first house
Right,
in order to have some more resources, in order to have the down payment and move forward with the second one. So that's something that people don't know you can do. Um,
right. And then this time,
great.
decided to go to Buffalo, New York.
And I
Yeah,
presume
it
you
was.
use the same resources to search for the for your subsequent homes that you uh, put under your portfolio.
Yeah, well, in Buffalo, I also had that connection there. My brother-in-law was living there, and they had bought a property there. So I had a somewhat more familiarity with the area, but I definitely did use Bigger Pockets forums to find somebody that knew that area. And actually, there's a reason because in the forums I was thinking about buying a long-term rental, basically another house to rent out. But then one person, which was surprising to me, he said, you can do Airbnb in Buffalo, and I'm like, who wants to go to Buffalo? But apparently, he showed me the data from airdna.co. It shows like the occupancy revenue that you can generate from Airbnb, and it looked accurate. And I was like, I think this can make some money, more money than like a long term rental.
Yeah, I think Airbnb would be another topic. If people are interested, please leave comments below, and we can make a deep dive video on that. So obviously, you like what you're doing. Um, is there a high point in this venture, or where you realized, hey, this is something that is relatively easy for me to do, and I can continue doing it? That you can pinpoint? Like, is there a thought you had, or did you think like you knew this was something you would like from the get go?
Yeah, definitely there was a high point. I think, like I mentioned with the appreciation, because uh, with the first rental, I mean, it was exciting to buy a property and say, "Oh, look, I'm a landlord," but cash flow was okay, and then with after repairs, sometimes it was not that great. It wasn't that exciting, and then I kind of forgot about it for a while. But then the appreciation, I think that's what the high point is, and realizing that I can tap into the equity and buy more properties. I think that's definitely a big one. And also the Airbnb, the cash flow from that definitely is you're able to like turbo boost your income and use that to buy more properties. So
Now, on the flip side, um, i- is there a low point where, or some difficulties you ran into that made you question perhaps the path that you were taking, or has it been relatively smooth sailing?
yeah, there was some issues with the Airbnb in Buffalo. I mean, with the first property in Kansas City on Bigger Pockets, I talked to other investors and they vouched for this guy. They said he's a good guy, and then they made money. They invested with him. The guy in Buffalo, he seemed to know what he was talking about, but nobody really had worked with him. But I kind of took a leap of faith. I was a little greedy because I saw the numbers. I'm like, this works better than long-term rental. So let me just jump in. Because he did have some reviews on Airbnb. He seemed to be okay, but nobody worked with him. And I kind of, that was kind of a low point because there was some delays in furnishing the property after I bought it. And he was supposed to help me with that. After he did that, the first couple of guests had left bad reviews, and the people who were helping him, they kind of quit on him, and he actually ghosted me one time. Oh, yeah, he ghosted me, then I had to manage the property myself from afar with the help of my brother-in-law who lived in Buffalo. So that was a kind of stressful time.
So learning from that, do you now, if you were to pick a new city, and obviously you usually buy rental property either far away unless you have the funds, because where you live, the cost of buying property might be high. As you were saying, being in a metro city, it's not something that would have allowed you to even have a start. So you picked another city. Now, do you think it's worth doing the research to kind of find a resource first before you even look at property, or you think like there will be something, not to really worry about that from the get-go and just look for properties first, rather than a resource that you can trust? Like, how would you go about it if you were to buy something in another city? Like, would you look for local help first before you look for property, or not really?
I think kind of both at the same time. I definitely think you need to have somebody you trust. I think that's one of the most important things because you can buy a good property, but because the property in Buffalo, it actually does pretty well. But if there's somebody competent and trustworthy running it, so I guess they're both pretty important because if you buy in a location where I guess it's not much appreciation or the numbers just don't work, then that doesn't make sense either. So it's kind of a, you got to do both.
Gotcha.
And actually, I am looking for a different location now. I think Buffalo is nice, but I'm looking for more appreciation at this point. Maybe areas where home values might increase more, maybe Florida or Texas.
So I'm glad both of your ventures are working out great and there was appreciation. But now, as you said, now you're moving along to looking for a place where you think there would be more appreciation. You're using the same resources to kind of look for places, or is there anything new that you've found from when you started to now?
Yeah, mainly connections. I guess still on the Bigger Pockets forums, and then I guess from there I've met other people who also invest in those areas or invest out of state. So you just start talking to people and going to I've gone to like real estate meetups with other people who invest in real estate. So you kind of build your network and learn from them, talk to them, or and they can share their network with you. So
Now,
I mean,
now, obviously, you have local help would you recommend someone try to do it themselves without local help? Like I know it's a lot more. You're pretty hands off because you have the local help, right? Is
Right.
that fair to say?
Yeah. I think if you live locally and you're handy, or I think you can definitely do it. And even long distance, you can probably do it. And people have said that they've been able to do it. But I guess for me personally, I don't want to deal with that headache and stress. So I know that
So
you have a rental property also, right?
yeah, I'm a accidental, I want to say. I was living at the home that I bought, and unfortunately, right after we bought it, we decided that we weren't going to stay there. So it ended up that it didn't make financial sense to sell it and lose out on the down payment and all that stuff. The house didn't really appreciate, so all the closing costs would be lost. So it turned out that renting it out more than covered the mortgage, so it's being rented out. So it's not something I look to do, but it is working. It has appreciated, so definitely, if I choose to go down that path, the equity in that property is there. But it was an adventure that I looked to start
Right.
on the flip side of yours, which is that's what you were looking to do.
So even though you weren't looking for it, I know for me at least, and other real estate investors, once they get in, they're kind of addicted to it. Do you think you would continue buying more properties?
I don't know. I don't mind it, but I headaches from real estate, potential headaches, even if you're hands off. I don't particularly have the mindset for it. Little things kind of stress me out a lot sometimes, even though they shouldn't. And big things sometimes don't stress me out. So sometimes I can deal with things that are perhaps more stressful at a easier than something that's not very stressful or shouldn't be very stressful. So I don't think it's my cup of tea, if I want to say it that way. But it has given me equity. So if I choose to do it, I think it would be successful. It's just with family, my full-time work. I think having that extra stress is not something that I am really looking for.
So you have a property manager, right?
Yes, I I would not be able to cope with any type of issues in the middle of my workday. And again, that's exactly for some of the reasons that Andrew mentioned before, which is um, I wouldn't know who to call, obviously, for things that break down. Now, if you're okay with making those calls and spending that time, I can not have a property manager. It's not that far away. It's a relatively 3 hour drive, but I wouldn't enjoy just going to do that in randomly in the middle of a day.
But are there any stresses with a property manager? What would you have to deal with since you have one?
No, I think my stress isn't that. It's really like the surprising costs, perhaps, of hey, this broke down, etc. But again, the property manager handles all that. And like I said, these are stresses I shouldn't stress about, but I am one of those people that if I can't control the situation and I'm kind of hands off because of it, it stresses me out because I have no idea if I am seeing the issue correctly or whatnot. So that's really the reason. And I am not very familiar with using equity to leverage that to that to the way where I can use the equity to purchase something new or take cash out. So that's probably another reason why I never really pursued getting anything further. Uh,
Uh, I mean, it's definitely harder now with the interest rates a lot higher, and homes not appreciating at the pace they were a few years ago.
right.
So
All right. I think this is a good place to stop. If you have any questions, please do ask in the comments below. And I know Andrew and I will try our best to answer specific questions. But
definitely.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you for having
All right,
this
thanks,
short
Tash.
chat.